is trying to avoid a situation where a potential global risk will become a reality. Then we will be rushed to react quickly. So we're trying to be more prudent than we were with climate. And in the case of climate, at the end, they took years in order to come to Copenhagen. And in the case of climate, climate is very strongly connected with energy. Energy is the source of that, and energy is something, energy production, which is quite well regulated, while cyber is difficult. So will probably be difficult tomorrow, the risk connected with food and water. But cyber is the new frontier, and I think you are very well, you are the person to ask your opinion.
Thank you. But building an international consensus on cybersecurity will require the commitment of all nations to, one, create a harmonized legal framework with respect to cybercrime, and two, for these countries to agree upon a minimum level of cyber stability through modifications to existing treaties. Now, the problem that we're facing is actually more legal than it is technical, but it's no less complicated. First, taking a look at cybercrime. Today, we have 1.8 billion and 246 countries and territories connected to the internet. Yet many of those countries don't have a cybercrime law. And many of them that do have a cybercrime law, they're just civil penalties. And then we have extraordinary differences and variances in the global legal framework for cybercrime where there are laws. And so it causes enormous problems with extradition, with bringing evidence in from search and seizure in another jurisdiction into a court of law. There's lots of variance in even defining what is a cybercrime and what activities are covered. The Council of Europe Convention on Cybercrime, which was opened for signature, I think, 8 years ago, only has 29 countries that have signed and ratified it. Only 50 countries are on the G8 24/7 point of contact network. This reveals that there are a number of countries, almost 200, that are not adequately trained in assisting and cooperating in cybercrime activities. The ITU toolkit for cybercrime legislation was developed by the American Bar Association, which I chair, their Privacy and Computer Crime Committee, and we're a multidisciplinary group from 15 other countries. This is being offered as an alternative to the Council of Europe Convention. It's sample language that countries can use to either draft cybercrime laws or amend their laws so that they're harmonious with those of developed nations and the Council of Europe. It's being offered by the United Nations International Telecommunications Union, which is responsible for the global cybersecurity agenda. So that's on cybercrime, is we must have a harmonized legal framework for cybercrime laws. Second, in the area of cyber stability, I'm very concerned because cyber wars become the drumbeat of the day. And nations are now doing national strategies, writing, standing up cyber commands to attack, defend, exploit networks. What's very clear is far more resources are being spent on how to conduct cyber warfare than are being spent on how to prevent it. And as Winston Churchill famously noted, it's better to jaw-jaw than to war-war. So I thank the EastWest Institute and John Rose for this opportunity for us to jaw-jaw about these issues. Now, it is absolutely time that countries come together and have discussions aimed at assuring an agreed-upon level of geo-cyber stability through mutual cooperation and international law. And what I define geo-cyber stability as the ability of all countries to utilize the internet for political, economic, and demographic benefit while refraining from activities that could cause unnecessary suffering and destruction. Now, the frequency and sophistication of cyber attacks over the past 2 years, we have Estonia, we have Georgia, we have a number of other attacks that have occurred, has caused a shift in the stability of the internet and uncertainty whether nations are actually going to be able to secure and control their infrastructure and their information. And so it highlights the need for a multilateral agreement on a level of geo-cyber stability. The political and economic shifts caused by the internet and globalization have introduced considerations that impact the fundamental approaches to national security that are based on geopolitical considerations, correlation of forces, and spheres of influence. Foreign policy is far more complex in an interconnected world where cyberspace knows no borders. Packets hop from country to country, but law enforcement and diplomats and government officials have to stop at country borders. Although geopolitical considerations still must be afforded great weight, threats to critical infrastructure must be evaluated in a broader policy paradigm that's based on maintaining global cyber stability. Countries have to be able to protect their infrastructures and their people and prevent unnecessary destruction and suffering. At a core, this means that the minimum level of cyber stability means a country's critical infrastructure should not be disrupted in a manner inconsistent with the laws of armed conflict and other applicable treaties and conventions. Now, the laws of armed conflict regulate the conduct of armed hostilities, and they're intended to prevent unnecessary suffering and destruction. And they are protected, they identify legitimate targets, and they protect civilians, prisoners, the wounded, the sick, and the shipwrecked. I think it's important to ask in the context of cyber stability, well, what is cyber warfare? I'm not too concerned about a definition. The United Nations has never agreed on a definition for terrorism, yet countries are working on that extensively. I don't think we need to waste 2 years arguing about a definition on cyber warfare. But I do think it's critical to say, should commercial critical infrastructure be off limits? Should it be protected by the Geneva Convention? Should it be treated like bio and chemical warfare as verboten? I think it's important to say, should cyber mercenaries not be allowed in the context of cyber warfare? A legal combatant has to be authorized by a government, wear a distinctive emblem or uniform, and be recognizable from a distance. Cyber soldiers are none of those things, so maybe we need to say countries cannot use cyber soldiers from third parties. We need to look at our existing structure. We need to look at the UN Treaty, the NATO Charter, as the underpinnings and the rule of law. And why? Because they're already enacted. They're already signed. They're already in effect in the global community. If we try to start some new treaty on cyber law, we're going to be at this for 10 years. And what's more is after you do a treaty, you have to have it ratified and implemented into national law. And so if we do the existing treaties and look at modifying NATO treaty, the UN Charter to accommodate the cyber context, if we look at modifying the Geneva Convention to say that commercial critical infrastructure should be protected, then that is a very big step in a direction towards cyber stability.
Well, thank you very much, Jody. I think you came with a very clear and specific on the international legal side, what we can do and probably what we cannot do, specifically, for example, using some of the international institutions like maybe Council of Europe. But, and you praised EastWest Institute for organizing this first summit. I have a question. What do you think, what can generally the NGO community worldwide do for this? Because when we look at and compare the situation here with the climate, there's huge activity of worldwide of NGOs on the climate risks and climate problems, while we don't see much of that here. What do you think that NGOs can do?
Well, I think NGOs can do a lot of things. One is they can produce statements that show consensus within the NGO community, which will help propel governments. So, for example, the World Federation of Scientists adopted the Ariche Declaration on Principles for Cyber Stability and Cyber Peace. A copy of that is in this document that's on the table out there. The principle was adopted by 10,000 scientists from around the world. It's a powerful statement on from the scientific community that we need to have cyber peace, not cyber warfare. This is from a group that helped major assistance with nuclear deterrence. So I can look at the EastWest Institute and what they're doing here. They're trying to drive thought leadership.